Hi there. In this presentation, I want to talk briefly about the possible psychological effects of the Pauline statement that we are in this world, but we are not of this world, and which is a key statement in Christianity and in Gnosticism, as it were, which is Christianity really, one of the lost Christianities, but Christianity none the same. And Um, also, the possible psychological effects of not believing that statement that we are not of this world, but we are in this world. And in this chart here, I've got here a breakdown according to the attributes of the square to the elements. So here we have our emotional needs ascribed traditionally to water, and here we have our volitional needs ascribed traditionally to fire. Volitional needs, what I mean by that is a sort of will to power and self-actualization, to put it in humanist terms. So you are uh, when you have what you desire, you have this feeling of satisfaction, you have this feeling of wholeness. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in life, or what you think you're supposed to be doing in life, so that would be satisfying a volitional need, a sort of existential thing, really, I suppose. And then over here, obviously, we have practical physical needs when they are met and ascribed to Earth, and then we have intellectual and cognitive needs, which are ascribed to air traditionally. And so, where's that gone? Oh, can't draw. So we have air, water, fire, and earth, and the needs that could be ascribed to these various alchemical, hermetic qualities. And so far, so good, and so far, so arbitrary. But never mind about that, because, well, of course, they obviously create a seamless garment. I mean, you can't just decompartmentalize intellectual cognitive needs from emotional and volitional and practical. Obviously, you can't do that. So you're looking at the whole person, you're looking at yourself as a whole individual with all these different categories of needs running around the place and joining together and creating subcategories altogether, I suppose 16 subcategories of needs. So the situation gets very complex, obviously. Anyway, be that as it may, when we think, I mean, most people, when they think they are of the world and they are of these needs, so that they have these needs, but they are these needs. So you are, I have emotional needs, but I am the emotional needs that I have. So there's a fierce identification with the thing, with what you need in life. So I am what I need. And when I have what I need more of it, or I need something different, but similar. So there's no really, obviously from the Buddhist point of view, there's no satisfying the person that identifies themselves too readily with their needs. Um, this we all know from experience, if not from tradition. So basically, a lot of people spend their time, they have too much reality. They are of this world and they know that they're of this world and they identify with all the things of this world and their needs and their avarice. And a lot of time people spend actually not wanting to be in this world at all, in fact. They want to be out of their heads and not in this world, surrounded as they are by all these different categories of needs. And this is where, of course, people succumb to the F demon, the fantasy demon. And so a lot of people want to be in the throes of a fantasy, ongoing fantasy or fantasies. And this, of course, has been the situation since the dawn of our species, since Cro-Magnon or before that even. There's been ritual, festival, psychogenic drugs, um, you know, a special sacred spaces created. And the idea is basically is that you are not in this world. It's for people that two kinds of people. There are people that have too much reality. They're too of this world, and their consciousness is sighted in the world. So they spend a lot of the time wanting to get out of their heads and out of this world. Um, and this could be, but it's also to do with an inkling that we are not of this world, in fact, and a lot of people want to explore other worlds which are not of this world, but they are all of this world big. In other words, the worlds of the demiurge. So wherever you go, you're just still within another world. It's just that you're not in this world anymore and on a temporary basis anyway. But you are, you imagine the worlds of the demiurge like Russian dolls, and you got the physical, which is the little Russian doll, little doll in the middle, and they got all these other dolls, layers of dolls, which represent subcategories of this world. Really, there's mirrors of this world, and you can lose yourself in these worlds in order to stop yourself facing up to the fact that you really are sort of really have your consciousness is sighted as something being of this world. And we have what Stefan Heuler calls spiritual materialism. And a lot of people worry about materialistic things, even when they're thinking about heaven, for example. Like some theologians think about heaven in terms of, wouldn't be very boring being in heaven, and wouldn't we be worrying about our loved ones being in hell if our loved ones have gone to hell? So we're worrying about that, which is a totally absurd concept to have, because we wouldn't be thinking like that if we were in heaven, because there wouldn't be any relatives and there wouldn't be heaven and hell. There wouldn't be any dualistic way of thinking. So it'd be another kind of order of thinking altogether. Um, but to ascribe our sort of materialistic emotions and feelings and worries to where we're going to be in heaven, for example, even supposing there is a location called heaven, but or even if the concept location applies to heaven, which it may not. I don't know. I'm not in heaven, of course, but which is a subject of another video, in actual fact. But anyway, so you have this desire to get out of your head and out of this world, and because you are so tied up with this world, basically, you're so bound by this world that all you want to do is get out of this world, and you create loads of layers of fantasies and explore the worlds of the demiurge, which are all rooted in fantasy. Whereas the person who contemplates, and this is probably a definite psychological consequence of thinking of this world, as well as being in it, which you don't enjoy most of the time. So you want to get out of this world, out of your head. So that may be a definite psychological consequence of existence, as it were. And the two tragedies: having what you want and not having not having what you want, and then having what you want. The two tragedies, as identified, um, and you have this contradiction, this sort of problem. Whereas the person who knows that they're not of this world, but they are in this world nonetheless, it may be that the psychological effect of contemplating your otherness to this world means that you are free to, as it says here, ethically do something about your emotional, physical, volitional, and cognitive, intellectual needs. And this is where we go back to the cultivation of practical energy, as Rudolf Steiner talked about, one of his key philosophies. That despite being spiritual, inverted commas, we are in fact incredibly pragmatic and practical, and we take care of our needs, but in an ethical way. And I've said somewhere else that ethics trumps physics, which trumps metaphysics, in the sense that having already realised that we are soul, having already realised that we are not this headache, or we are not this emotional need, or this physical need, whatever. Having realized that we are not these things, we are actually soul, this in theory is supposed to leave us free to face up to our needs and do something about them, but in an ethical way. So we have ethics, and then we have physics, and then we have metaphysics. And metaphysics isn't too much of a feature in our lives. Uh, in that sense. We're not using metaphysics as a way to escape physics, which is why most monastic orders were very practical, and they grew vegetables and helped other people and provided out relief to people in the Middle Ages. Because although you realise that you are saved, and although you realise that you are a spiritual being and that you have a spiritual body, which is the most important body, which is the body that has been saved by the sacrifice of Christ. This leaves you free to not really bother too much about metaphysics. That's already been cared for by the action of Christ on the cross. So you no longer really think about occultism and metaphysics and all that kind of stuff, because you are sure in your faith, hope, and charity. Um, so you basically can be practical in an ethical way, whereas a person who is not very sure of what they are, whether they're of or in this world, spends their lifetime trying to get out of their heads, and drifting into various fantasy scenarios and fantasy obsessions in order to escape the physicality, which they think they're nothing else but. So they think they're physical, and they think there is no escape from the physical, except through drinks, except through sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that kind of a way. But I think that it's easier to get deceived by metaphysics and to go into metaphysical fantasy, than it is to actually lead a practical life, an ethical life, and that, as demonstrated by this channel. In fact, how much easier it is for me to make videos about metaphysics, about I talk the talk, but I don't walk the walk, kind of thing. And really, I should go out and do my gardening, and be nice to some people, and be nice to people. And this is the spiritual life, in actual fact, knowing what I know about not being of this world, but being in this world. And you're in this world to face up to your needs in an ethical, responsible way. Um, and that basically is the spiritual life. It's not looking for ectoplasm and strange occult phenomena and bending spoons and all this kind of gibberish that people get sucked into. But of course, it's not actually gibberish, but it is a chimera. It is a mirage. We're walking across this desert of materiality. We're walking through this desert of this world, the world's demiurge, and mirages appear around us, and hallucinations due to our suffering. And we get pulled into all this in the same way as we get pulled into satisfying our emotional, volitional, cognitive, and practical needs. And so, in a way, it's kind of contradictory, a spiritual person, but to go out and do my garden and be nice to people, and nice to animals in my immediate neighbourhood, and help people in my immediate sphere of influence. And again, people can often make a political cause into a fantasy, and get sucked into complete insanity. In fact, as a result of their desire to change the world and to save the planet, because it becomes a sort of fantasy. It becomes a trick by which the demiurge makes you more and more worldly on one hand, but on the other hand makes you more out of your head. So you can become out of your head on the desire to help other people by their millions, that sort of thing. So it's a trick by the demiurge, in fact, to make you not realize that you are soul. But this is so easy for the demiurge to do. It's so easy to be distracted by this world and by the many worlds that surround this world, that you won't contemplate daily that you are not of this world. And by different ways and means and on different levels, you get sucked into believing that you are of this world instead of being of the spiritual. Um, but the main thing, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because it's so easy to get distracted. You could get distracted by the feeling that you're easily distracted, and you could become obsessed, in fact, by not being distracted by the demiurge, and that itself will become a distraction and an obsession, an example of spiritual materialism. So you see how subtle all this is, and leading the simple life that others might simply live is the best course of action. And knowing that you're going to live a fragile life. Your spirituality is very fragile, gossamer, and silk-like, and I don't know, like the wings of a moth or a butterfly, and easily squashed, easily destroyed, easily corrupted, curtailed, falling in, crippled by contradiction. Um, and that's what happens to the good in this world. And whereas the evil is always exalted in one way or other, in one subtle form or another, by the demiurge and his agents, who are there to stop you from contemplating daily that you are not of this world, even though you are in this world. And of course, in this world means you have to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are God's. And this is a very important concept to bear in mind always. And I think it's a very comforting concept as well, because you're not too hard on yourself. You're not. You know you're going to fail. But if you're aware you're going to fail and be distracted, you might not be so distracted, and you might not fail so completely as somebody who doesn't know all this, who hasn't contemplated all this at least. And I'm not saying that I know it all, or have contemplated it all, or even have lived by it all. I mean, really, following this video, I should not make any more videos and live by the Gnostic rule, which I've outlined on this channel. Look it up, the Gnostic rule. Develop, cultivate practical energy, Steiner would say, on one hand, but know my spiritual origins on the other.